My English is not perfect, but I tell it how it was. I'm an old man now, but I remember this night clear. I've hunted many years in the Carpathian Mountains. Wild boar, deer, sometimes hare. The forest gave food and we respected it. This was when I was younger, maybe 30 years old. Strong, sure of myself. I thought I knew the mountains like the lines of my own hand. That evening, I went out alone, tracking boar. I carried my rifle on my shoulder, knife on my belt, and nothing more. It was nothing special. Many times I went this way. It was late autumn. The air was sharp in my lungs. The ground was covered in dry leaves. The trees were bare, scratching the sky, but the pines still stood thick and dark. The sun was already falling behind the ridges. I had a little more time before the night came, and told myself I might bring home meat if I was lucky. It felt like any hunt at first, quiet and steady. My boots pressed into the damp earth and the smell of the pine sap clung in the air. I thought only of the boar, and nothing more than that. Food to feed my growing family. I did not know that that night the hunter would become the hunted. Not far from the path I found the first signs. The ground was torn, rooted as if by a plow. Earth fresh and damp, still smelling strong. That meant boar had been here, maybe only a few hours before. A little farther, branches were snapped low to the ground, the way they do when a heavy body pushes through them. I crouched and touched the prints. They were deep, wide, pointing towards a hollow in the slope. My father taught me young how to read them, where the animal goes, how long since it passed. These were fresh. I thought tonight we eat well. I moved carefully step by step, laying my boots soft over leaves. My ears searched for every sound, the grunt of a boar turning earth, the squeal of piglets maybe, the sudden rush of a startled animal. The forest in late autumn is different. It feels open but still heavy, where the bare branches let in more sunlight, yet shadows still hold tight under every tree. I walked deeper, my rifle loose in my hands, ready. My heart was steady. These mountains were my home. I thought I knew them. I had gone maybe 20 minutes deeper when I felt it. At first, only a small thought in the back of my head, like the forest had shifted, like I was no longer alone. Then I heard it. A step, not mine. I stopped, holding still. The forest went quiet. Nothing. I walked again, slow, and behind me another step, heavy and measured. I thought that maybe it was another hunter. Many men come here for boar. Sometimes you cross paths, but no voice called out, no greeting, only that step. I thought maybe a bear, but bears do not walk like this. I tested it. I stopped quick. The sound stopped quick too. I moved again slowly. It moved again just as slow, just behind me, always matching. The weight of it pressed into my ears, too heavy for a lynx, too self-aware for any animal. My heart started to climb, slow but steady. Still, I told myself to keep going. I was not a child, I was a hunter, and the mountains were mine. But with each step, that unease grew. Soon, it was not only behind me. I heard it shift, first to my left, then to my right, as if it moved through the trees, keeping the same distance but never showing itself. A crunch of leaves there, a branch bending here, always close, always hidden. I turned my head quick once and saw something, just a shadow slipping between trunks. Completely too big for a man, too tall for an animal. I remember my skin went cold. Goose flesh was rising on my arms under the coat. My body knew before my mind did. There was some kind of predator near me. I gripped the rifle tighter. The wood was hard in my hands. My finger rested near the trigger, and I thought maybe to fire into the air to scare it away. But I did not. Something in me said it would only make things worse. An instinct that I didn't even know that I had. Then came a very strong smell. It was sudden, and it rolled out of the forest. Wet, dirty fur, but sharper. Blood, old, and rotten. It filled my nose, burned my throat. That was when I knew this was no boar, no lynx, no man. Something else was out there with me, pacing me in the dark, yet I did not know what. I came to the edge of a ridge as the light was fading. The trees thinned a little, and I stopped to listen. And I saw them. Eyes. 2 glowing yellow eyes fixed on me from between the trunks. They burned like lantern glass, catching the last of the sun. They were too high. No bear stands so still and moves with such ease on 2 legs. These were level with me, maybe even higher, and I was not a small man. The rest of it stayed hidden, only the suggestion of a shape, broad, heavy shoulders shifting in the dark. It didn't move, only watched me. I froze where I stood. The rifle felt heavy in my hands, finger resting near the trigger so close that if I pulled it, I could definitely take a shot. But my chest was locked tight. I knew then I was in trouble. The boar that I was following was long forgotten. There was only me and those eyes in the dark. And then it came without warning. One moment the eyes glowed from the trees, the next the whole shape burst out. Tall, upright, arms swinging like a man, legs thundering across the ground as if a man was sprinting at me. It was too fast. It was charging downhill through the leaves. The sound shook the ground. Heavy, thundering steps. Claws ripping up the earth. Branches cracked like bones as it tore them aside. What I was looking at was no animal and no man. It was some kind of beast from the depths of hell. Something that's called a werewolf. My body moved before my mind. I turned and ran. The rifle weighed on me, banging against my chest as I stumbled through the brush as this thing was growling and roaring behind me. I ran so fast that branches were tearing at my coat and slapping me in the face, but I did not stop. Fear pounded my chest harder than my legs could carry me. Behind me, it came closer. I could hear its breath. I could hear it deep and hot, like a bellows. I heard claws strike dirt, then stone, then dirt again, each step closing the space between us. This thing did not slow. It did not let the ground or the woods in front of us, in between us and around us, stop it. It moved with ease as it grew closer and closer to me. The forest echoed with breaking wood, snapping twigs, those growls that rolled through the trees and into my body. I lifted the rifle once, thought about trying to aim, but I could not stop, not even slow down. It was too close, too fast. My finger was pressed against the trigger but frozen. I knew if I stopped to shoot, I would never rise again. So I ran. I continued to run until I thought I was going to collapse. The slope broke open. I saw water flashing below. It was a mountain stream, narrow but running fast, almost icy with autumn melt. My legs carried me straight to it. There was no thought left, only the choice that was right in front of me. I threw myself in. The shock stole my breath at once, the cold stabbing into my bones. My body went numb so fast it felt like knives in my chest. The current pulled hard, dragging at my boots, but I clawed for the rocks and held. I turned back. It stood at the bank, massive in the dusk, the outline black against the trees. It paced left, then right, claws on its feet digging into the soil, but it did not follow me. It leaned forward once like it might come in, but it stopped short, snarling at me. I stood there, staring at this creature, half frozen by the water, as this monster was pacing, trying to find a way to me. I saw it all. The shaggy fur, the muscles that were built like a man. This thing was so human-like that I thought that at once, maybe it was a human. Maybe the stories are true, that a man can become monster. And then it let out a roar. It wasn't an animal roar. It rolled over the stream like thunder, shaking my chest. There was something in that made my skin crawl worse than the cold. There was an anger to it, a human emotion. I felt then that this thing hated me. It looked so unnatural, yet perfectly capable of moving around on its own. This was no man in a costume. This was no bad dream. This was a creature with a body that was long and powerful, the spine rising high, fur bristling in a ridge from neck to tailbone. Its forelimbs were thick like a man's, ending in claws that dug into flesh when it wanted to. Its hind legs, if you want to call them that, were bent like a man's. They did not stand like a wolf. This creature stood just as I did, but it was definitely built to spring forward and tear something to death. I saw no tail. When this thing crouched, the head hung low between the shoulders. It had a long muzzle. It bared its teeth in a snarl that steamed in the cold air. Its eyes glowed above the water, catching what little light there was left, and the way it shifted its weight told me it could lunge into the stream at any second. It moved like a predator, but not like a wolf or a bear. Something heavier, stronger, a hunter that knew exactly what it was chasing. I clawed along the rocks, water biting every part of me, eyes locked only on that shape. Only when it finally turned, going back into the tree line, did I dare to pull myself out, shivering and gasping on the far side. I stumbled home, soaked through, teeth knocking so hard I thought they would break. My rifle was gone, dragged away by the stream. Only the knife at my belt remained, and I clutched that my entire journey home. My legs shook all the way down the path. I prayed every step that I would see lights in the village again. When I finally came to my door, my family looked at me with wide eyes. My wife asked me what happened, but I said little. Only that I slipped, that the hunt went badly. She did not believe me, I think, but I saw that she noticed I could not speak any more, and she let it rest. I sat by the fire that night wrapped in blankets, staring into the flames, and did not close my eyes. What was it that I saw? There was only one thing that my mind could wrap around. Only one thing that I could accept as an explanation for what it was that I saw. What I saw that night was a werewolf. Plain and simple. After that, I never hunted those ridges again. The boar could have the mountains. That thing could have the boar. I stayed closer to the village, and if anyone asked why, I only shook my head. Some things are not to be spoken. Now I am old, but I remember. That night I learned the hunter can become the hunted at a moment's notice. We think we own the woods, but there are things that own the woods more than us. The Carpathians are old mountains. Old things still live there. Things that legends are made of. And maybe sometimes those legends are not folklore. Maybe things like the Strigoi or wolfmen in these stories are real. I tell you this plain. They are not stories. I walked those woods, and something walked with me. Something that you can only dream of in nightmares. My name is not important, friend, but the place was Austria, deep in the mountains where the forest grows heavy and the snow lies deep for half the year. This happened long ago, when I was younger, strong enough to spend the nights alone in the woods without a second thought. I tell the story now because I still see it in my dreams, and maybe speaking it plain will help. I'd gone to a small hunting cabin, kilometers from the nearest village, the kind of cabin you only use for shelter when chasing deer. It was built from rough log with one door, one window, and a stone fireplace. No electricity, no phone, just the fire, the woods, and the night. Snow covered the ground that evening, crunching under my boots as I brought in a bundle of wood. I built a fire on the hearth, fed it until the room glowed warm, then cooked a simple meal: bread, cheese, a small amount of sausage that I carried in my pack. It was the kind of quiet that feels safe, only when the sounds are crackling of flames and the wind pressing against the shutters. When I finished, I laid my rifle within easy reach, just beside the bed. That was routine. Nothing strange about it. A man alone in the forest learns early to keep his weapon close. After that, I stretched out on the narrow cot, listening to the logs pop in the fire. It was supposed to be just another hunting night, and nothing more. Outside, I could hear the wind sliding through the trees. That makes the forest sound alive. The shutters rattled now and then, but the logs were tight and the fire strong. I felt safe enough. I listened to the fire crackle, the wind sigh, and thought about the hunt the next day. A good spot near a ridge where I'd seen tracks. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing to stir the nerves. But then the scratching began. At first, I thought it was just a branch moving in the wind, perhaps dragging across the door. But the wind had been blowing all evening, and I knew the trees near the cabin. None leaned so close. I sat up, listening harder. The sound came again, this time slower, longer, as if something dragging claws against the wood. It sounded like the scrape of something hard, dragging down the door with a patience that made my skin prickle. I stayed still, listening. My heartbeat was beginning to climb. Wolves, I thought, or maybe a bear nosing at the cabin. Both had come near villages before. Uncommon, yes, but it would not be strange. I had seen both myself. Neither worked the wood like that, though. Wolves scratch to get at prey, frantic and fast. Bears pound, break, claw with force. This was something else. This was with a purpose. I reached for the rifle, my hand steady out of habit, though my throat had gone dry. I thumbed the safety off without making a sound, then stood and moved closer to the door. The firelight threw my shadow against the wall. The scratching deepened. It did not go away. The sound of me walking should have spooked any type of animal out there. But there were long strokes of claws dragging through the wood, each one groaning like it meant to peel the planks away layer by layer. Then it stopped. The silence after felt worse. My ears strained so hard I could hear the blood pushing through them. I thought to call out, to shout, to scare whatever it was away. Perhaps it was a man trying to scare me. Maybe my voice would drive him into a different place. But something inside me said no. If I raised my voice, if I showed myself, I'd be giving something away. Whether that was an animal out there, or some person. So I waited, rifle ready, eyes locked on the door. I told myself it was a wolf. I told myself it was a bear. I told myself it was somebody trying to spook me, but the hair on the back of my neck stood stiff. It was as if my body knew better. Something else was outside. Something that wanted in. The scratching did not last, but it grew into something worse. At first, the claws dragged longer, harder, pulling deep into the wood. I could hear the fibers tearing, like someone carving with a dull knife, though this did not sound like a knife at all. This sounded like a handful of claws. Then it came faster, angrier, ripping at the door in short bursts. I stood frozen for a moment, rifle in my hands, waiting for it to pass, but it did not pass. The blows grew louder, heavier, no longer scratching, but a pounding. A fist, a body, something massive slamming into the wood. The whole door shook on its hinges. The firelight danced across the cabin walls, the shadows of the beams stretching and shaking as the door took each hit. With every blow, the frame groaned. One hinge let out a squeal. I was scared that it would not last for long. I finally forced my voice out, harsh and sharp. "Hey! Get away!" The words bounced uselessly against the wood. Whatever stood outside did not stop. It did not care. In desperation, I lifted the rifle and slammed the butt against the wall beside the door, making a thunderous crack. In the forest, noise like that will scare wolves, or boar, or bear. The sudden shock drives them off. Not this creature. The thing outside only grew angrier. The blows came harder and faster, like it wanted to tear through in a single rush. I could hear wood splintering somewhere in the door. A sharp crack split down the grain, and cold air whistled through the gap. I felt panic rise in the back of my throat. I had hunted many years, faced charging boar, even stared down bear, but this felt different. Not an animal desperate for food, not a beast startled by fire. This was something that wanted me. I pressed my shoulder against the door, bracing it with my weight. The wood vibrated with each slam, jolting through my bones. My heart pounded so loud it drowned the fire's crackle. I could feel sweat prickling my back even though the cold air seeped through the cracks. For a moment, everything went quiet. I leaned in, straining to hear. My eye caught a sliver of movement through the split in the boards. Just a gap. It was no wider than a finger, but what I saw froze me. An eye stared back at me. It was glowing in the firelight. An orange or red color. Round and wet like a wolf's, but set too high, too forward. And then I could see more. The edge of a muzzle. A black nose. It was wet and sniffing. Teeth bared, breath steaming against the crack. Wolf, my mind screamed, but it was not a wolf. The head was too high, the shoulders too broad. The weight against the door was beyond any animal that I knew. It snarled. It knew that I was there. It knew that it was getting in. The sound filled the cabin like thunder rolling inside my chest. The smell pushed through the crack. It smelled of copper blood. It burned the back of my throat. My stomach was already twisting. I vomited a little. I stumbled back, rifle raised. The wood door bowed inward. The creature shoved again, claws raking, boards popping at the edges. I feared that one more push and it would be inside with me. I shouted again, not words but raw sound. Fear turned into noise. My shout was swallowed by another roar, deeper and stronger. It was the roar of victory. This thing knew that its meal was close. The doorframe groaned like an old tree in a storm, and for a heartbeat I thought it would break through. I pulled the rifle up, finger tight on the trigger, waiting for a head to burst through. Everything told me to fire, to end it right there, but some part of me held back, knowing a shot through the door might waste the chance, might not stop what pressed against it. The snarls came. In that moment, I knew this was something older and stronger than any animal in the forest. It wanted me out of the cabin. It wanted me broken and dragged into the snow. I braced myself back to the cot, rifle raised. I thought the wolf head was going to push against the door and no longer just be a shadow. I knew that it was trying to come inside. I knew the door would not hold. Every slam drove the frame deeper into the floor, and each groan of the wood told me the strike that was next could be the last. But somehow my panic gave me strength. I dropped the rifle onto the cot and grabbed the heavy oak table where I had eaten. My hands shook, but I managed to drag it across the floor and shove it against the door. The blows continued to land as I braced it. The table shuddered, rattling plates and a tin mug until they fell to the ground. I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the handle, then hauled 2 crates from the corner and stacked them up. It was a poor barricade, but it was all that I had. The pounding stopped. For a moment the silence stretched, long enough that my chest eased just a little. Perhaps this thing had left. But then the sound came again. This time not at the door, but at the side of the wall. A heavy thump that shook the whole cabin, rattling dust down from the rafters. Another thump, and claws dragging across the wood. It circled, moving slow, testing the walls like a butcher tapping at meat. I snatched up the rifle again and turned with it, following the sound from wall to wall. The fire hissed low, and I fed it more wood quickly, desperate to push back against the dark. Maybe this thing was afraid of fire. The shutters clattered next. The window shook hard in its frame, the latch jumping with each slam. I aimed, heart pounding, but the glass did not break. Why didn't it break? Why did this thing not come through the window? Instead, the shutters groaned under claws scratching deep gouges into the wood. The kind of sound that was made to unnerve, to wear down the nerves of the man inside. It worked. My stomach was a mess. Sweat ran cold under my coat. Then the growling came again. Not the sharp snarl that I heard before, but a rolling, guttural thunder that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The growl turned into a roar. The sound was so loud. Somewhere in the dark, another answer howled. It rose in the distance, carried on the wind. My blood went cold there, friend. There was more than one. I knew that I was not going to make it out alive. I could barely contain one of those things trying to get in. But if there was 2, or a pack, I was doomed. For a moment, the noises stopped. Then I heard a creak above me. Slow at first, then heavier. It was footsteps on the roof. The boards above me bowed as something paced above step by step, claws clicking on the wood. My mouth went dry. Wolves do not climb. Bears do not climb like that. And neither of them make those howling noises. I had heard wolves howl before. This was something that did not belong in our world. It moved across the roof, pausing over the cot where I sat. I leveled the rifle upward. Though the ceiling was too thick to shoot through, it gave me some bit of comfort. And then it was as this thing leapt. The roof bucked with the impact. The whole cabin rocked under the weight as it landed again and again, testing the strength of the beams. This thing was now jumping up and down on the roof, trying to break through up top. For an awful second, I thought the roof would cave in and I would see those glowing eyes pouring through the hole. I sat there, crouched low, rifle aimed, every nerve screaming. I do not even think that I was breathing, and I know I did not blink. Then came another howl. It poured out from the roof, long and rising, filling the cabin until my chest rattled, and I wanted to close my ears to the noise, but I did not dare let go of the rifle. The howl stretched out into the forest, and somewhere in the distance the echo returned again. I wanted to run. I wanted to flee into the snow and take my chances in the dark, but I could not move. My legs were locked, my eyes fixed on the door, waiting for this thing to burst inwards. It dropped down from the roof with a heavy thud. I stayed crouched, rifle pressed at my shoulder, eyes wide, sweat burning into them. I knew then the night was not about hunting anymore. The night was about surviving until dawn. The silence outside was worse. I could hear it breathing through the cracks, slow and heavy, as though it was pressing its face against the door and the walls, trying to get a good whiff of me. Again and again, my finger went to the trigger. Each time I heard it loud, I thought of firing through the wall. The rifle was steady, though, as my arms trembled. I knew I could have but one shot, and I was not about to waste it. The shove came next, harder than before, the whole barricade groaning as the table legs screeched against the floor. I lined the barrel with the door and fired, no longer willing to wait. The gunshot inside that small cabin was deafening. My ears rang. Firelight flashed against the smoke as the recoil slammed into my shoulder. From outside came a sound I will never forget as long as I live. I will never forget it in 100 lifetimes. It was a howl of pain, so deep it surely rattled the glass in the window. It wasn't just a cry. It was rage, wounded pride, fury that shook me worse than the gunshot itself. I pulled back the table with a heave and threw the door open just enough to see. The firelight from inside spilled across the snow, making a beam of light through the door. There it was, sprawled in the drift. It was huge, much larger than a man. The wolf-headed thing thrashed and writhed, claws gouging deep scars into the ground. Its limbs jerked, its body twisted. There was snow spraying into the air as it rolled. The sound it made was more than animal. It was broken, angry, furious at the pain. For a moment I thought it might die there, that the shot had ended it. But then it stopped thrashing. The night went quiet. Too quiet. My ears were still ringing from the shot. I stood frozen, rifle shaking in my hands. The thing rose fully, and when it did, the night seemed smaller to me. It was as if it was pressed tight around the cabin. When it rose to its feet, I saw it clear. The shape was massive, taller than any man. Shoulders much broader than my own, too broad to even fill the doorframe. The body was thick, and it had dark matted fur and dull streaks of brown and black. The arms were too long, hanging low, muscles shifting under the coat like ropes pulled taut. The head was a wolf's head, yes, but stretched over something wrong. The muzzle was long, the jaws lined with teeth that I could see even from a distance. The ears stood pointed. Triangles that moved back and forth as this thing moved around. Its legs stood like a man. It stood with its knees bent, as if it was thinking of charging me. One thought crossed my mind. Those legs were built for running. When it snarled at me, I saw strings of spit flash. It did not move like a beast that was lost or confused. It stood there as though deciding, watching me the way a hunter studies prey, watching me the way a man watches something when he's learning. It let out another roar that I felt in my chest, but it did not come again. Instead, it turned. Heavy steps thudded into the snow, fading into the trees. The breathing grew faint, then vanished, leaving only the echo of its retreat. You had asked, as this thing fled, if I saw a tail. My answer to you, friend, is no. All I saw on this creature was a rump. I stayed there, back to the door, rifle clutched in shaking hands, listening until I was sure that this thing had gone. For a time there was nothing but silence. I held the rifle across my lap, chest heaving, waiting for the sounds of claws at the door again, but instead came the screams. They rose out of the forest, sudden and violent. Long tearing cries that began as roars and broke into something almost human, like a man shrieking in pain. They must have rolled through the valley and echoed off the ridges. I'm sure that these screams could carry for miles. It didn't stop. Again and again the sound came, sometimes close enough that I thought it was circling just outside again, sometimes far as though it had limped deeper into the woods. But it always returned, ragged and furious, tearing into the night like it could not let go of me. I sat in the chair by the door, rifle tight in both hands, the barrel angled toward the crack. My shoulders ached, my back burned, but I could not put the gun down. If I even closed my eyes, just for a second, I imagined waking to claws on my face. The fire burned low, and I fed it wood with shaking hands. When I added wood to the flame was the only time I left that chair. Each time a log cracked, I flinched, certain the noise was outside, and it was showing that this thing had returned. Hours passed this way. The cabin was a box of fear and smoke. The screams went on until near dawn, and then at last there was silence. But I did not trust that silence anymore. I stayed there, motionless, ears straining, the rifle still across my knees. I sat like that until the black outside faded into gray and I could see the first line of daylight creep past the shutters. Only then did I let myself believe that the night had ended. When the gray light finally seeped through the shutters, I did not wait. I shoved the chair and table aside from the door and eased it open just enough to see the snow outside. The world was silent. I did not waste a moment. I stepped out, rifle ready, and walked fast toward the trail. My pack, my food, all of it left behind. I did not care. The barricade stayed in place, the cabin door hanging half broken. I never looked back. By the time I reached the village, the sun was climbing and my legs were shaking. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost. The men at the inn asked me what happened, and I only said, "I will not stay alone in those woods again." They thought I meant wolves. I let them think so, but I know better. It was not a wolf, not a man. Something different. Something that knew how to strike fear into a man and break him from the inside out. The Carpathians are deep mountains. Lots of stories happen here. They hold things you cannot name, things that only belong to the night. You think the cabin keeps you safe, but the walls are thin, and you may be wrong.